This is Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, brought to you by the Iowa Soybean Association, your daily recap of the information that affects Iowa's farmers, producers, and consumers, right here in the heart of the heartland. With reports from our award-winning broadcast team of Dustin Hoffman, Riley Smith, and Mark Magnuson. Now, from the IARN studios in Des Moines, here's Mark Magnuson.
Hello and welcome into Ag Matters PM on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Mark Magnuson. Today is Wednesday, November 8th, 2023. So glad you could join us for today's show. In today's episode, I will be joined by Dan Pannier with GROWMARK, and Dan is going to tell us about the current supply situation for propane here in the Midwest and kind of what we can expect going into those colder winter months. We will also have a check of the ag weather outlook, but first, let's run down the closing markets.
It's time now for the Ag Matters PM Closing Market Summary, your source for market analysis and settlement prices from the day's trade in Chicago, courtesy of the folks at agmarket.net.
At the end of another trading day, we are joined now by Tyler Schau of agmarket.net. Tyler, what did we see take place in the ag marketplace today?
A lot of seesaw action in the markets today. Woke up, soybeans, January soybeans were right up against what we would call a resistance line, kind of the downtrend from the summer highs. And 1380 seems to be a really stiff resistance in January beans. And you just follow all those contracts out, and they all pushed up right up against resistance. A lot of that buying came in the overnight early this morning on some export news. Some stories came out last night. China had bought up to 10 cargoes of soybeans, and then this morning we got some confirmation with some flash sales, a lot of exuberance, and then as the day went on, that excitement kind of faded, and then we saw a lot of buying enter into the wheat space. There's some talk, there was some rumors. I haven't read anything that have confirmed this, but some stories of a iron ore tanker that actually got struck by a missile over in one of the ports near Odessa in Ukraine. It was a Russian missile that struck it, is what I've read. And that kind of shot the wheat market up. And then it also gave all those gains back, only to resume. And we're going to end up closing up about 20 cents in the wheat market, which that's a big deal in the wheat market after taking a whipping over the last several months.
So, Tyler, what was the story for corn then? Did it go along for the ride with either of those two commodities?
That's really what it feels like. I would have told you earlier, corn was just kind of going along with wheat. I think the strength in soybeans is helping corn out. We've talked a lot here over the last few weeks. There's a lot of people paying attention to the weather in South America. I wouldn't say it's improving any. The forecasts still remain a little dry in some areas. I will say in the areas in the south where they've been getting pounded with rain, that seems to have backed off, but there's some replant issues going on there. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I think, the story in soybeans and wheat were enough to kind of hold corn up. Corn had a decent rally started. We didn't fade nearly like beans did, but closed a nickel off its highs.
And then for those export sales, Tyler, is that more to come, you think? Is that the start of something one-off? Where are you looking at with the exports?
Well, that's the one reason personally I didn't get too excited over them, and why Ag Market would probably say just kind of hold your horses a little bit. We're still behind. Our book of business on beans should be rolling. We should have had a lot more of these earlier in the year. We haven't. That could just be a factor of the Brazilian crop was so big last year that their export season and window just lasted longer. And so that's where that business has been getting done. But I still think net, if you take the 50-foot look at it, it's yes, it was good. I'm not saying that it's not a big deal, but at the end of the day, we're still behind on sales to meet our USDA target on a seasonally adjusted pace. I'm not going to get too excited. Hopefully there's more to come. And one of the things that could have happened, maybe we saw China step in and get long a lot of futures here a while back, and now they're turning them into physical sales. And when they do that, they're just going to exit the futures position. You're going to see some selling on the board. So kind of got to be ahead of it. If you're trying to trade it or take advantage of it after the fact, you're probably going to be too late.
Tyler, tomorrow we have a WASDE report for the month. What are you expecting from that report as far as what we're going to learn and kind of what you're interested to learn about tomorrow?
The analysts don't have a lot of expectations. I think the last I saw, the corn yield's expected to be up 0.3 of a point. Soybean yield unchanged. You'll probably see ending stocks grow a little. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't trim a little bit more export business because of the fact that we are behind. But I'm not looking for any massive changes on that report. What I will be interested in seeing is the world numbers. The one thing we've been saying, with soybeans in particular, you've got a very tight U.S. ending stocks predicted for United States soybeans. But the thing that's kept the lid on the soybean market, even with those tight ending stocks, has been a very large world number. So it's going to be interesting to see if the USDA does anything with South American production on this upcoming report, if that starts to get lowered. Some of the private analysts have been starting to subtly lower their yield estimates and production estimates. So we'll have to see what the USDA does on the WASDE there.
With the movement in the grain markets today, what did we see take place in the livestock side of the markets?
More back and forth trading. I tell you what, today was we've seen some nasty moves in that feeder calf market. Today was an impressively nasty move, followed by a recovery. Within a span of, it was like 20 minutes. It was early this morning. Within a very short span, we saw about a $7 trading range from low to high in November feeders, which was very erratic. November feeders comes off the board next week. It settles against the feeder calf index. There wasn't a lot of reason for that to be to go under that much pressure early this morning. It did, and then it rebounded and went the other way. And so at the end of the day, what it tells me is people are just as confused about this cattle market as I am, and the market's trying to get a handle on where it should be. Good chance it's overdone to the downside again after that bloodbath the last 2 days, but time will tell, I guess.
And have we gotten any better news in the hogs?
That hog has stayed supported. The cutouts have been strong. I think I'm worried the hogs have got some struggles ahead. You're entering into a time period where there's higher production seasonally, and the cash market just doesn't seem to want to pull this thing any higher. When the December contract is down at 71.50, and that was well below where cash was trading. A couple of weeks ago we were down below. In December we were in the 60s. Cash isn't really pushing higher. It's in fact, I would still say kind of just slowly grinding lower. And now you've got February hogs, which are going to be the front month contract for too long. They're at that $75 level. So I think because of the mechanics there, it's going to be tough to really push hogs much higher. And then, a lot of this stuff that we've been dealing with in the overall market's been a lot of softness in the China economy, and that doesn't necessarily bode well for the hog market.
Tyler Schau of agmarket.net, our guest here today. Tyler, what's the best way for our listeners to get in touch for more marketing information?
Look us up on the internet, agmarket.net. You can scroll around, try to find a broker in your area. And if you want to call direct, the number 701-987-6009.
Lots of great information with agmarket.net. Tyler, thank you so much for joining us here today. Have a great rest of your day.
You bet. Take care, Mark.
Thank you to Tyler Schau of agmarket.net for our closing market analysis. It is time now for the closing numbers, and those numbers courtesy of the folks at Bar Chart. December corn up 7.5 at $4.76 even. November soybeans up 1/4 cent at $13.49 even. January soybean meal up 20 cents at $4.39 even. January soybean oil up 21 cents at $49.34. Chicago wheat up 22 even at $5.92 1/4. Minneapolis wheat up 11 1/4 at $7.35 1/2. Kansas City hard red wheat up 22 1/2 at $6.55 even. December oats down 10 1/4 at $3.41 3/4. On the Merc, December live cattle up 62 cents at $179.40. November feeder cattle up $2.32 at $234.55. December lean hogs down $1.40 at $71.50. December pork cutout down 42 cents at $80.97. And Class 3 milk up 10 cents at 17.16. And that does it for our closing markets here on Ag Matters PM. It is time now to hear from our sponsor, the Iowa Soybean Association and the Soybean Checkoff. And when we come back, I will be joined by Dan Pannier with GROWMARK. This is AMPM.
Iowa Soybean Association is driven to deliver for Iowa's 40,000 soybean farmers. We're proud to provide objective agronomic research, a helping hand with soil and water stewardship, and timely industry news powered by the Soybean Checkoff. Learn more at iasoybeans.com.
You're watching Ag Matters PM on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. And in today's episode, I'm joined by Dan Pannier with GROWMARK. Dan is a propane expert with GROWMARK. He's going to tell us all about the supply situation right now for propane in the Midwest, some of the work that GROWMARK has done with its infrastructure, and getting that ability then to deliver the propane to us here in the Midwest for the upcoming cold winter months. Mark Magnuson for the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, and I'm joined today by Dan Pannier. He is the Propane Operations Manager with GROWMARK. Dan, thanks so much for taking the time to join us here today. Could you just kind of tell us a general 30,000-foot overview of where the propane situation is right now, Dan, when you look at the Midwest and really Iowa in general?
So just in general, we've had a very good build season over the last 6 or 8 months. We didn't quite hit record levels, but darn close to it. So we peaked out a little bit over that 102 million barrel mark, which is pretty sizable compared to a year ago. I want to say it was probably about 88 to 90 million barrels. So overall in the U.S., propane's looking a lot better than it was 12 months ago. Little thing about that, though, we did have a fairly decent sized draw this week. I had about a 1.2 million barrel draw as of last Wednesday. Most of that, however, was in the Gulf Coast. Not a big surprise there. Here in a little bit, I'll break down a little bit more of the Midwest and the Gulf Coast inventories overall. But we did have a slight build in the Midwest, which is kind of a little bit surprising, quite honestly. Haven't seen a lot of home heat demand, but have had some pockets of crop drying, mostly in that northern part of Iowa and Illinois and on up to Minnesota and Wisconsin. So was a little bit surprising just in general that we did have a little build in the Midwest overall. In general, typically, most of the time forecasters would expect to see a slight draw in general for the same week in October, week 43 of the year. But it's only about a 500,000 barrel draw. And we saw a 1.2 million barrel draw last week. Most of that being in the Gulf Coast, which is we saw, well, really about all that in the Gulf Coast. About 1.68 million of that was in the Gulf Coast alone. So that drills you down to another little bit of topic, to talk about, and that's the exports. So although we do have a lot of inventory in the U.S. today, probably one of the things that we need to keep in mind is just the way that exports are going out of this country. Boy, 1.8 million barrels per day last week, almost 1.9, and we have broke over that 2 million barrel mark just a few different times. So that's one thing to watch very close. So now as you drill down a little bit closer into the Midwest inventories, when I talk about Midwest, that's mostly Conway, Kansas. There are a few other storage hubs in the Midwest, a little bit in Indiana, a little bit in Michigan, it's a little bit there in Minnesota, but the far majority of it is in Conway and Bushton, Kansas. That compared to a year ago is about 11.2% above a year ago and about 5% above the 5-year average, sitting at about 27 million, almost 27.2 million barrels. So we do feel a little bit better than we did a year ago down there. Pretty good, about almost 3 million barrels over what we were a year ago down there. So inventories in general, I guess, start to feel pretty good about today.
So Dan, when we talk about, like you mentioned, that drying demand for drying down some corn, you mentioned northern Iowa has been the areas where that has been needed, and then off to our east. And that's kind of what I understood, is that it's been Wisconsin, kind of off to the east of Iowa, Ohio, those areas that have had to deal with having that wet corn that they needed to dry down just a little bit.
Yeah, just in general, it feels like it's ran across one of those lines around US 20. And whether you're in, and I would say east, central Iowa along US 20, then on over to Illinois, then up through Wisconsin, and actually seeing a little bit of drier demand kind of that north of Interstate 80 as you get to Indiana, Ohio as well. So, yeah, I have seen a little bit of pull. Now you get over there to Indiana, Ohio, that starts to pull a little bit more in the Bellevue market in general. But everything else around here would be the Conway market.
And then, Dan, again, for the home demand and just shop demand, people using it throughout the winter, what's that looking like for right now?
So right now, in general, we do feel pretty good about those inventories. But one thing to keep in mind, and everybody always says, man, we got a lot of supply. As you look in Conway, Kansas, shouldn't be no problem getting propane this winter. You always got to remember that stuff's sitting in Conway, Kansas, or sitting in a storage hub somewhere. And to get to that local marketplace, whether it's in Des Moines, Iowa, or Rockford, Illinois, or Chicago, Illinois, it takes about 10 days to get it through the pipeline to push that up out of Conway, Kansas, and get it to our marketplace. So, and not only that, there's other products that ship in these pipelines. So another thing to keep in mind, it does take a little bit of time to get here. And I always like to see people plan ahead, don't wait till that cold snap or when everybody's over on Christmas Day and walk out and say, oh, heck, I'm down to 10%. I better get some product in my tank. I always like to stay on the top side of that tank as you're leading into the winter, especially if you see a pretty decent cold snap coming up.
And Dan, have you seen that as a trend of farmers having more on-farm storage and that ability to have it on hand and have that propane when they need it?
I would say certainly, you go back to that polar vortex. That was shortly after I got in the propane industry, actually. But you go back to that polar vortex in 13, 14, and boy, if that wasn't a lesson to be learned, there's been a lot of retailers in general add storage over the last, I guess, 10 years now almost. And I would tell you a lot of your farmers for your grain drying demand or livestock, whatever it may be, would also have added quite a bit of storage for the same reason, just to have a couple extra days of supply on hand. So if it does get to the need that you've got to go to Conway, Kansas, because they're not putting any more pipelines in to move the propane. Yeah, they're putting pipelines in, but that's for a lot of raw material, not necessarily to move the propane around the countryside. So, extra storage in your backyard, that certainly helps for sure.
And Dan, I know when we talk about GROWMARK and the work that's been done to kind of build up that infrastructure and make sure that you do have that ability to move that propane, have it on hand, is that why GROWMARK should be the choice for farmers here in Iowa, because they know that GROWMARK has done that work to make sure that they can move that propane?
Certainly, I could agree with that 100%. So over the last, since 13, 14, we've made investments in rail terminals out there in Iowa. We acquired a terminal there in New Hampton, Iowa that was closed due to the reversion of the Cochin pipeline. Now, in the same sense, that is a truck in, truck out facility, but it's still a fair amount of storage right there in that marketplace. And if nothing else, it helps you get to the, get you a few days down the road so you can make a plan, get trucks in place. We do have a very strong relationship with a lot of common carriers, as well as we do have a fleet of our own trucks as well. So we've made a pretty sizable investment, whether it be in transportation or the terminal side, to make sure that we can get supply in the market area when it needs to be there.
Dan Pannier, our guest here from GROWMARK. Dan, what would you like to let our listeners, our viewers know about when it comes to thinking about the winter, kind of making sure they have the propane they need, or getting that, getting that deal in place to have the propane that they need?
I would say most importantly, just make sure you're in close contact with your supplier. I know a lot of people, kind of on a keep fill, so shouldn't be quite so concerned there, but it doesn't always hurt to check and see how your supplier is coming along. So make sure you're in close contact with your supplier at any time that you see that cold weather coming. If you're living out in the country or you've got livestock, it's always good to plan ahead. I'd rather put 200 gallons in a tank and keep it on the top side, than be putting 200 gallons in a tank just to get it by in a polar vortex situation.
He is Dan Pannier, Propane Operations Manager with GROWMARK. Dan, thanks so much for taking the time to join us here today. Have a great rest of your week. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and you guys too.
That was Dan Pannier with GROWMARK. It is time now for a check of the ag weather outlook. Partly cloudy to partly sunny skies, kind of the story across the state of Iowa today, as we do have some mild temperatures. It still feels nice outside, but it is going to cool off just a little bit tonight as we will have statewide temperatures into the 30s. So it's starting to actually feel like fall in the overnight hours. And then tomorrow, It's going to be a very sunny day across the state of Iowa. However, it is going to be breezy. So we will turn our attention now to the National Weather Service and what's in store for the next 24 hours. As you can see from the National Weather Service, mostly cloudy with scattered slight chances for rain today. High temperatures in a range of 55 to 65. Decreasing clouds and breezy tonight. Cooler temperatures as lows dip into the 32 to 37 range. Tomorrow, sunny and breezy, widespread sunshine with high temperatures expected 51 to 58. And now for our affiliate weather map for Thursday. Cherokee, sunny and breezy, a high around 51. Shenandoah, sunny and 58. Des Moines, sunny and breezy, high of around 56. Albia, sunny and breezy, high of 57. Waterloo, sunny and breezy, high of around 54. And Clinton, sunny and windy, high of 55. For a more detailed forecast in your part of the state, make sure and check with your local Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network affiliate. And that's going to do it for our Ag Weather Outlook. That also brings us to the end of this episode of Ag Matters PM. You can find all of our content on our website at iowaagnet.com. You can also find all of our video content on YouTube. While you're there, don't forget to subscribe. Click on the notification icon as well to get those videos to you as soon as they are uploaded. Also, don't forget our free twice daily market podcast, which can be found on Apple, Amazon, Google, Spotify, and Podbean. And you can follow us on social media as well through X, Facebook, TikTok, and LinkedIn. From the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network studios in Des Moines, I'm Mark Magnuson. For Dustin Huffman, Riley Smith, and Andy Peterson, we thank you for watching. This has been Ag Matters PM.